Hello, welcome everyone. I'm here with a wonderful LabSmarts user, Leah Blondin. She's an FDN, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and we're going to talk about how she uses the percent of free copper and that formula in her practice. We'll first start off learning a little bit about Leah and what type of practice that she has, and go a little bit into how she incorporates blood work into her practice. So welcome, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm glad you're here. Tell us about your practice.
Well, my business, it's called Life Lab Wellness Co. Really, it's all about making your life your lab on the premise that you are your own best health detective, your own best biohacker, your own best scientist for your body. And you need to learn a system and a blueprint on how to understand that and integrate that into your nutrition and your health building program and your longevity plan of anti-aging and staying healthy and young. But I primarily work with busy female entrepreneurs or like stay-at-home, work-from-home moms who are just really needing to optimize their energy and start feeling like themselves again. I kind of work with them in one of three main hormonal shift areas of their life, either like the preconception and optimizing future pregnancy time, or the postpartum area where they're trying to rebalance their new body and all these hormones and these changes, or in that menopause area where hormones are doing a major shift again and having those certain endocrine infradian rhythms are ending. And that's when women need those help, is through those big hormonal shifts. Right. So that's primarily where I'm working with people.
And you can relate to working with women with children because you have two little ones of your own.
5 and 2.
That's great. So then tell me about how your practice works and how you incorporate blood work into your practice and working with clients.
So I have 6 main labs that I like to run everyone through at the start of working together, just because we really need to take an analysis of the whole body. As an add-on, I do the blood work that I use the LabSmarts analysis with, and this is usually when people are bringing in their own lab work. So I always encourage everyone to exhaust your resources with your doctor, with your health insurance. Go get as many blood tests and markers and things ran as you can, just to utilize what you're already paying for, and then they can bring those to me and do an analysis that's included on top of those 6 other functional labs. In the 6 functional labs, I do an intracellular blood test, which is looking at the amounts of micronutrients inside the cell. And then this is where the LabSmarts comes in, and using that for the extracellular blood work, since it's only taking, serum and things that are outside of the cell. It's really great to be able to do a comparison on what's going on outside the cell and what's going on inside the cell, because the cell membrane, a lot of times, is where we see some problems. You can have enough thyroid hormone in your blood, but you're having a thyroid problem because it's not converting inside the cell to do its job. And that goes for all of the intracellular nutrients. I like to make sure I have all bases covered so they can bring that extracellular blood work to me for a deeper analysis, because no doctor's explaining it to them. They just get a phone call that says, "Oh, you're fine. It's great." And they're like, "But I don't feel good." And then when they get it back from me and they see their LabSmarts analysis, and they're like, "Wow, this makes so much sense. And I'm not a crazy person. And wow, I have so much peace because things actually make sense now."
You're relaying how their blood looks to how they're feeling and correlating it that no one's ever done for them.
Mm-hmm. And that comes from using the proper optimal ranges and not the lab ranges, which is what I really appreciate with your software, because it's literally just color coded, very easy to read. How far are you and where is your optimal range, essentially, because everyone is a little bit different.
Yeah. You don't order blood work for them. You take what they already have and incorporate that.
I do order blood work for people who want to dive a little bit deeper. A lot of times it is, they're getting their CBC, their CMP, a couple markers extra from their doctor. And they say, "I think I really have, I really want to check my full thyroid. No one's ever done a full thyroid on me." So I'll run the rest of their thyroid markers. I'll run the rest of their iron markers. I'll run the extra stuff that the doctors and the insurance are not covering. That's when I usually order that kind of blood work for people, is after they've already done the main 6 foundational labs. And if they desire, if we need to go a little bit deeper, and the markers I just mentioned are a lot of the ones that we need to go a little bit deeper.
That makes sense. So you have then a package. They work with you and they get these 6 labs plus you looking at the blood work that they already have.
Correct.
And what are the other tests that you use in the package?
I use the SpectraCell micronutrient test to look at all vitamins, minerals, amino acids. I love that one. I'll utilize the HTMA, the GI map, we use the Dutch, we use the MRT for food sensitivities, and then we look at their metabolic.
Wow. Yeah, that gives you a pretty complete picture.
Yeah. And that's why we want to look at your hormones. We want to look at your immune system and your digestion and your detoxification capacity and your nervous system. Like, we have to look at all these things in order to have a full-bodied program for the person. We can't just say, oh, I'm just going to run, here's your thyroid markers. I focus only on thyroid and let's fix this, because your thyroid's never going to get fixed if you don't have a full body approach. Your thyroid depends on other organs and other systems and other nutrients. And if we're not assessing those, how do we know? That leads to more problems down the line and a bigger waste of money and a bigger waste of your time and energy. So I just like to cut right to the chase and give people the data so they know who they are on a biochemical level.
Yeah, that's smart. Do you rerun any of the tests after?
Yeah, if they desire. A lot of times people don't, just because they're so relieved of their symptoms and they're feeling so much better and everything so much. And they're like, I'm good. But I do think it's wise, especially if we're using certain nutraceuticals, just to make sure we're not overloading as well, which is the case of copper. And what I'm finding is that we are overloading on nutrients.
You're seeing a lot of higher copper?
Yeah. So it was really from, and what really led me to LabSmarts was my own personal health journey, which I have a long history of depression and anxiety. And I had seen tons of people, tons of doctors, and definitely got a little bit better. I got a lot better in my own training, but there was still something missing. And that's where I came back to regular blood work from your doctor. That's where I came back to LabSmarts, was because, yeah, I've done all of these functional tests and these, all of this other stuff, but I wasn't looking at some of the basics that could have been looked at by my doctor and my health insurance 10 years ago, and made a huge difference in decades worth of my life and my time and my own family. And that was getting blood work for copper and ceruloplasmin and zinc, just some basic micronutrients that we definitely need, and just making sure that they are not at too high of levels.
So that's what you had.
That was like the thing that changed everything for me completely, was figuring that out. That just kind of opened up this whole new world of like, oh, I skipped all of this really cool blood work analysis that our doctors should have been doing. I had decades worth of lab work and everyone just said I was fine, but where we needed somebody that was going above and beyond. And that's what really re-excited me about the whole world of this is right at our fingertips.
Yeah. And I mean, you were the one that came to me. You discovered LabSmarts, but you were like, hey, what about copper, ceruloplasmin, and percent of free copper? And I had copper and ceruloplasmin, on the list to add, but, I didn't really know about that percent of free copper formula. And so you turned me on to Dr. William Walsh and what they're doing at DHA Lab. I'm using that formula now in the software to calculate that percent of free copper based on your feedback. So I'm really grateful for that.
Well, I'm really grateful for that, because previously I was doing that math by hand, and math is not my strong suit. And there are conversions and
depending on the
dividing while you're adding. And it wasn't fun for me and my brain. So I'm really grateful that I have something that I can just type in the numbers and it correlates for me and plots it on a graph. It makes it so much easier to explain as well when you can just see, oh, you're in the red. Red is extreme.
So then you end up doing these formulas on your own for yourself first, and finding out and ordering ceruloplasmin and copper and zinc, and then finding out on your own that your free copper was high.
Yeah. And it was only through William Walsh and through the Walsh Institute that I was able to figure this all out, because he is hyper focusing and hyper studying depression and mental health and bipolar and schizophrenia and all these major psychological conditions. Autism, ADHD are very high up on the list for having high amounts of free copper. So I just found this fascinating that in all my training and all of my extracurricular reading and all of the doctors and specialists I've seen, no one's ever mentioned this. It's what I needed, it's what I needed. And it's what a lot of my clients needed. I find that if you don't keep looking and you just say, oh, you have a hormone problem, and you try to do bioidentical hormones and all this hormone support, and like a lot of people's numbers, they won't budge because there's underlying conditions that are driving those factors and those symptoms. And we're just chasing symptoms down the road, just trying, we'll try this and we'll try this and we'll try this for our symptoms. And we're never looking at what the actual problem was. And a lot of times, in many people, copper is the actual problem that's driving their estrogen dominance, that's driving their depression, that's driving their ADHD. If we're not looking in all the right places, how do we find the right answers?
What are the other symptoms or conditions that you're finding or you learned about?
In my scheme of work, postpartum imbalance, that was a really big trigger for me. And it's a lot of trigger for women, because a lot of times until your hormones start changing, this copper problem won't come about. And a lot of times it's actually passed down from the mother to the baby during gestation. So the mother has a problem, your copper raises during pregnancy, it doubles in pregnancy, and you need to offload that. So you're offloading it. If you're not doing it well, postpartum, you're going to store it in your organs, and you get pregnant again, and then more copper dumping happenings. And you have another pregnancy and it gets worse, and another pregnancy and it gets worse. So those postpartum issues or multiple pregnancies and these things start getting worse is a really big, because the hormones are driving it. The estrogen is driving it. Postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, regular depression and anxiety, anger, rage, brain fog, ADHD, nervous system dysregulation. So with copper, you're just chronically in like this fight or flight response. It's a sympathetic signal to the body because it upregulates norepinephrine and adrenaline in the brain. It's called an excitotoxin because it activates those things in the brain, and then it drops dopamine. So a lot of times people on Adderall, people who need like these dopamine hits, a lot of times that can be a copper problem. Hypothyroidism, copper actually blocks the conversion of T4 to T3. It also helps it, but in an abundance of copper, it'll block the conversion of T4 into T3. Anorexia or lack of hunger, that was a big sign for me as well, was just lack of hunger, not being hungry in the morning time. Having viral, fungal, yeast infections is really common. Chronic low blood sugar, estrogen dominance, like I mentioned before, it's even very high in certain types of cancer, which working with clients who have cancer, that's definitely very correlating.
Wow.
So a lot of these conditions, we are just giving blanket statements for hypothyroidism and saying, oh, here's what you need, and never actually doing a good investigation on what the person really truly does need or does not need is also really important as well.
So then in pregnancy and second and third pregnancies and copper keeps building up. Why is it building? I mean, why can't the woman recycle that copper and dispose of it? Why is it getting stored up?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, and that's a very good question. A lot of times it is a liver problem. A lot of times it's an adrenal problem, and a combination of those, because ceruloplasmin is needed to transport copper. And if we don't have enough ceruloplasmin to do the transporting, that could be part of the issue. Another issue, just totally separate, is just having too much copper. So being exposed to it through copper plumbing or swimming pools or even organic. Copper is used on organic vegetables. So it's not technically a pesticide that's poisonous because it's natural, it's copper. But if you're eating too much, if you're getting too much copper, you're getting too much copper.
Is it mostly an acute exposure to copper that you're seeing, or or liver issues?
Everyone's a little bit different. It totally depends on their numbers.
That's why you have to look at their whole body, right? Because you don't know.
Yeah. And so even within the copper realm, there's no one size fits all copper analysis or, copper protocol or copper anything, because maybe it's your adrenal, maybe it's your liver. It's probably both. Maybe it's a bile problem because your bile is the one that's going to excrete copper. So if you can't get your bile working and it's not excreting. Environmental exposure, like I said, organic pesticides, pool water, copper pipes. I know the house I grew up in had copper pipe. That was probably a big load on my mother during pregnancy and then all throughout growing up. And then, as soon as I hit puberty, 13, 14, I was telling my mom, hey, I'm sad for no reason. What's the reason? That probably was a huge component of it. Now my estrogen is rising, so copper is going to become more of an excitotoxin. All the other stuff I'd been shot up with as a baby and, fed in the 90s, it's not going to treat my body well to help detox and get rid of these things. Also, vegetarian and vegan diets are very high in copper. Avocados, chocolate, nuts and seeds, leafy greens, spirulina, mushrooms, all of these really healthy veggie foods are very high in copper as well, especially organ meats and seafood like oysters and lobsters are high in copper. And right now in the health realm, I'm seeing organ meats just skyrocket in what practitioners are recommending to people. Literally everyone is saying organ meats are so healthy for everyone. Everyone needs to be taking organ meats because they are nature's multivitamin. They're packed with nutrients, and like, yeah, they are packed with nutrients, and maybe we don't need that many nutrients.
Right. No one says
Maybe
that.
everyone's different and
Right.
needs things. So any blanket statement like that just is a red flag for me at this point, because that's got to do some damage, more damage than it is doing good.
But the chiropractor that I used to see, he blends organ meats and drinks that in the morning. I'm like, and that's all he doesn't have any vegetables or anything. I'm like,
oh yeah,
it may seem healthy now, but he could be loading himself up with copper and not even realizing it.
Yeah, people are copper deficient. I'm not saying that people aren't.
Right.
But people definitely could utilize organ meats and higher copper foods in certain seasons for certain reasons at certain levels. Not every day, all day, every day at every meal. Make sure you're piling on bee pollen because you're deficient in copper. Well, you've never even tested your copper. So how do you even know? So that's my whole thing. It's just
it all comes back to that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Ceruloplasmin and copper serum and zinc too. How was your zinc levels? Were they really low then?
It wasn't extremely low, but it was low enough that it would bring an imbalance to my copper and zinc ratio, contribute to an imbalance in those two minerals because they are antagonists. If you have a high amount of copper in your body, zinc is naturally going to be depleted, and vice versa. If you're taking tons of zinc, like everyone did in COVID, yeah, you could definitely be deficient in copper because you've taken all of this and you haven't balanced it out. Another problem is birth control. Birth control is a major driver of copper problems as well. And then something that's not talked about as often is Pyrrole disorder. Pyrrole disorder is a stress disorder brought on, the more stress there is, the more pyrroles you're going to create. And pyrroles in the urine pull zinc and pull B6 out of the body and never give your cells a chance to utilize those nutrients. There's people with Pyrrole disorders who have a ton amount of copper because their zinc is being excreted through their urine and they're not picking up anything to be utilized. So these people need sometimes triple, quadruple the amounts of zinc because of this disorder. And that's something else that we can test for as well. So
that's what that's part of William Walsh's thing, right? With the cryptopyrrole testing. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And just understanding and figuring out those things, at least ruling them out if you're struggling with any of those issues is just so worthwhile, because even if you are taking zinc and you have a Pyrrole disorder, you're not going to get enough unless you know that you need to double or triple or whatever it is for you, those amounts. So everyone needs a customized amount.
Wow. This is fascinating. This is cool. I love to see, how you're using LabSmarts and these markers on blood in action to really help people. It's great.
It's really fun.
The clients that you show the LabSmart report to, they like it. They understand their values on bar graphs and
it's super, super straightforward. Even without explaining it, I could just pop in the graph and they understand red is in the alarm range. Red is not good. Maybe I should stop taking this organ meat that everyone keeps telling me that I should have been taking because now my levels are through the roof. Just the other day, it wouldn't even register on your copper was so high. It was just up at the alarm range. It needed to go higher, but it couldn't go higher, which is fine.
You're seeing these correlations. Yeah. Oh, great. What do you recommend? Do you have them go get phlebotomy done to get some of that copper out of the blood, or?
Again, that totally depends. On the person and the status of their other organs and their other micronutrient deficiencies. So my next step is making sure what are their micronutrient deficiencies, because there's lots of different cofactors that are important for copper synthesis and regulation. And so we would want to check all of those. I also like to check their adrenals. What are their cortisol levels like? Are they completely tanked? Are they completely overloaded? Is it a mix up between the two of high free cortisol and low metabolized cortisol, or, that helps us know what's going on with the liver. And so really we need to assess all of these different organs at the same time so we know what steps to take, because copper, if you have a high free copper percentage, when you start to detox it, can have they call it a copper dumping effect, or like a Herxheimer reaction, where all those symptoms, the depression, the anxiety, the The fibroids, if you have fibroids growing and you start dumping more copper, those can become more painful. So it's really important to take it slow and steady and with a bio-individual approach, because some people are deficient in vitamin C. Some people have tons of vitamin C. So, which has a lot to do with copper chelation in the body. So do I want to give more vitamin C to this person over here? Probably not. They're already kind of balanced over there. There's some other factors that need to be addressed before we just start throwing supplements at someone to detox. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe something like castor oil packs would be a first place to start with someone who's having major symptoms, just because that's going to be a little bit slower and it's going to address one of those major drainage pathways, which is important for the release. So if we start too soon and too fast without the proper drainage preparation so we can excrete it, it's going to just become worse for symptoms in their body and in their mind. And it's linked to a lot of, suicidal ideation, and which we want to stay away from. Absolutely. So it's not something that I recommend just going at it alone without having any clue of what's going on in your organs and in your systems and in your deficiencies.
Man, you're really doing the full picture and really assessing somebody's health from a holistic perspective. That's amazing.
Yeah, we have to. I don't see any other option at this point, because picking and choosing the areas that people want to focus in isn't
right.
It's not working, or else they wouldn't be coming to me saying, I've already worked with all the practitioners. I've already done all the tests. Yeah. There's something missing, and that's bringing it all together in a blueprint that makes sense for a person's journey, and that's completely customized.
Wow.
Because awesome. nothing else is working out there. We're seeing it all over. Everyone is still the unhealthiest they've ever been, and we have more tools than ever, and more resources, and more money, and more everything, and people are still getting sicker and sicker. So something is missing.
Something's missing, and it all could be, it's just basics, like simple micronutrients.
It is simple stuff, lifestyle factors, wearing a castor oil pack so your bile isn't sludgy. I mean, I'm not diagnosing anything. I'm not doing anything crazy here. It's just we're working on balancing your life.
Yeah, we're just pointing out imbalances where in different body systems where people can start to work on to then correct those hormonal imbalances, because like you said, right, hormones out of whack, that's not the root cause. There's something causing those hormones to be that way. So
exactly.
This is great. Thank you. This is a fun talk.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so where can people find you? Do you have a website and Instagram or?
Yeah. So people can find me over on my website, which is lifelabwellnessco.com. And over there, I have a free training that teaches you how to customize your health and your nutrition and your supplements and your lifestyle protocols by using lab data and a scientific approach based on your unique biochemistry. So this is something that you actually have to learn for yourself. You can't just offload all of that to me, because it's you making those changes. So it's really a full way
you're empowering people to learn about themselves, right? Then they can go off and, once things start to get balanced, they can keep them that way because they know the underlying physiology of their body and what it takes to keep things balanced. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I like to teach really the scientific method that we all learned in 4th grade, because that's very valid. And we're all going out there, we're asking questions, what's wrong with me? Oh, maybe it's this. And we're creating these hypotheses of what's wrong with us. And then we decide to skip those major steps in the scientific method, which is gathering data and doing an analysis. And we just jump right over into experimenting with different supplements and things, random things. And then we guess how we did because we don't have anything to compare it to. So it's really walking through the full scientific method for yourself and your body and your health. And then there's no more questions. Then you get to figure it all out because you act like a scientist to understand it all.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of like the premise of it all.
Yes. You're empowering people to be like the scientist of their own body or something like that.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. Yeah, what features of LabSmarts do you find most beneficial? Yeah.
So with the LabSmarts software, the things I found most beneficial was the comparison reporting. So I really want to teach my clients how to be preventative and in control of their health for years to come, not just right now in this moment while we're working together, but like in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, how can you have control and understand what's going on? And that's where the comparison reporting really shines a whole new light, because they get to learn to understand their own baseline and their own optimal range and what works for them. Someone recently came to me and said, oh, my doctor says I have high cholesterol. I have high cholesterol. I'm so worried about it. Putting it into the LabSmarts analysis, she didn't have high cholesterol. Her cholesterol is definitely in a very healthy range, which I was excited about. I'm like, this is great news. So she was like, phew, I'm so relieved. Like, this is great news. And there was definitely some things to dive deeper into with like her HDL, LDL ratios and stuff. So everything's wasn't perfect, but at least we made a little bit more sense of it and had some different areas that we could continue looking down instead of just saying, here's a cholesterol problem, stop eating eggs and meats and stuff, because that has nothing to do with it.
And so it reduces their anxiety over that whole cholesterol thing.
Absolutely.
People are pushing fear around high cholesterol, and that's not even the root cause of heart issues anyway.
And then even when you look back in time at that comparison report, they can see like, oh, well, my cholesterol's always kind of stayed the same. You know, there's no huge spikes. There's no outside ranges at all. This is just my baseline. I naturally produce a little bit more cholesterol than the average unhealthy person, right? And a lot of that can actually come back down to genetics and having different genetic variables that does create a person to have or create more cholesterol in their body. So her understanding, or a client understanding that that's their baseline, brings them an insane amount of peace, literally for the rest of their lives, knowing that they have data that correlates and makes sense and somewhere to go to turn to when something does shoot out of range. Oh, it's 300 now or whatever. Like, that's definitely out of range and not normal for my baseline. And that's something that I really want to teach people. There's no one size fits all, even for the optimal ranges. Like you've said recently in your pregnancy seminars, everything changes depending on where you are in your life, and everyone's a little bit different. So we need to help people understand how different they are and how wonderful that is, and how that's not a scary thing. It's just something that needs a new lens for them to look at.
I like that. And they're instead of always thinking about comparing themselves to that test and that range, and having them understand their baseline and where they are. And then and I see that too. And people are like, have consistently low platelets, and that's just where they're at, and that's okay. Like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to compare yourself to yourself.
First.
And how you're feeling. And
so what else, any other features that you like in the software?
What you did with the copper is obviously really, really great. Like, that was literally taking me 10 to 15 minutes of time to freehand calculate, and it wasn't always super accurate, so I'd have to go do it again. And so I really like that it's like to the second decimal accurate in what the percentage is for people. So that literally saves me time and accuracy, and just the visual comparison of all the additional elements, like the copper to zinc ratio is also really important, which is different than the free copper percentage. That's the calculation of copper and ceruloplasmin. And then copper and zinc also needs to be looked at. You just kind of did all of that there for me, which makes it really easy to assess someone's hormonal or mental health status regarding those metals.
Yeah. So I saved you time with math. There you go. Awesome. Cool. Oh, I'm glad. I'm happy. I'm happy that you find the software valuable.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I use it every day.
Yay. Thank you, Leah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.